Hello and welcome. This is the For the Fans podcast, episode number 10. We've made it 10 episodes. Woo! I'm Justin Melillo. Alongside, I've got Kevin McAdams.
Woo!
Yes, Kevin. How are you doing tonight?
Well, we were talking about it a little bit before. I've been doing a whole new setup for my computer. Got 3 monitors now. Got a new wheel. I'm about 80% done. Got the triple monitor setup done. Got the desk built. It's my ultimate birthday gift to me. I'm turning 27. No, actually, I'll probably be 27 by the time this gets released because it'll probably be done on the 16th or the 17th. So this is my gift to me. So I've been working on this whole weekend, this past week, all while the races were on. I was working on it when the trucks in the Xfinity race was on, and then I finished it during the Cup race. So I'm very happy to have this done for the most part. And then I was actually pretty happy with how the races went this week. How are you this week?
Well, let me first say happy early birthday. It's only in a couple hours that you're going to be celebrating that, so happy birthday on that.
Thank you.
Anytime. I'm doing all right. It's Monday, so we're back to our normal schedule with that. So tomorrow will be Tuesday, and I'll be able to do the editing and get everything out on time, which will be good for the podcast. I'll be able to do some clips, which I wasn't able to do last week, unfortunately, because I was so crazed last week with work and just my uncle had come up from Kentucky, so my whole Saturday was being spent with him and moving some things around. So it was a hectic week last week. I was happy to get the podcast out at all, but I definitely didn't get to do all the things that I wanted to do with it. But this week will be different. It's like I said, it's episode number 10. So we've made it 2.5 months now, which is pretty darn cool. I'm looking forward to many more, and yeah, that's pretty much it from me. So let's start talking some NASCAR. This past weekend was Kentucky. And we had a triple-header weekend, which started on Thursday night and ended on Saturday night. Thankfully, weather was not any type of issue for anybody. Sometimes it is during Kentucky, and it had been before the repave, where they used to have like weepers and stuff like that. Now they don't have to worry about that with the repave, and thankfully they didn't have to worry about any weather regardless, because it was really hot. It was really it was a beautiful weather for racing, and we got 3 really good races in my opinion. They were all very different feeling races, and we got I'd say at least the first race and the last race we got some, I don't want to say surprise winners, but definitely not guys I would have picked to be putting in victory lane.
Yeah, it was I liked this week a lot. All things considered. I mean, Kentucky's one of those weeks where it's a forgettable weekend, just because for whatever reason I've really enjoyed Kentucky before the repave. It was very different to any other mile and a half that they ever went to. It had a lot of bumps. It was very abrasive on the tires and on the car. They still do it to an extent, but they would come through the front stretch, and if they cut down low underneath the yellow line on the apron, they would bounce because of the rain gutter and the rain sewer right there. So, I mean, there's a lot of really cool things that were a part of this track. And then they repaved it about 3 years ago, and then they reconfigured it along with that. So it's with this weird trend that SMI decided to adopt, where one corner is 14 degrees, which is the original banking in 3 and 4, and then they made it 20 degrees in 1 and 2. And for whatever reason, the asphalt looks like it's aged pretty well. There's even some patches that they've done to the bottom line, but they bring an incredibly hard tire here. They talked about it all week long, that you really don't need to take 4 tires. They talked about it ad nauseum during the Cup race, but for the trucks, it was just as the same consistency as the Cup. So they to start off, Sheldon Creed, if you go through stage one, I've never seen a car, or in this case, a truck, and I think Enfinger was right behind him about a second. I've never seen a truck open up a 10-second lead on third place in that amount of time. It was insane how fast he was to start the race. And it made me think that, oh wow, Sheldon Creed's finally showing up to a race. He's finally gonna pull one out for GMS. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. But I thought we were going to have a really boring race. And man, we did not have a boring race at Kentucky for the trucks. It was an incredible showing by the Gander Outdoors boys.
Yeah, it definitely. I, I, I was happily surprised with the outcome of the race, and the overall tone of the race. It was like you said, Sheldon Creed. He had gotten out and went on and dominated the entire first stage, but after he got back, he was in dirty air. He was never quite the same after that, and that really opened it up for the rest of the field to have a chance. And what got me was, looking at these stages, the stage one went completely caution free all the way up until the end of stage one, but then you started getting some dicey restarts going on. So they get the restart to start stage two at lap 42, and a couple laps later, you've got a pretty big incident involving Spencer Boyd, Natalie Decker, and Jordan Anderson, where they spread out across the front stretch, and Boyd went below onto the apron, and Decker held their line, and then Boyd came up and took them both out and collected Anderson. And that started a trend where they would get these restart wrecks going on for like the next couple of restarts. You had the next restart, the 42 truck, and who's that? Chad Finley. He spun out on the ensuing restart. Then the next one, you had a pretty decent sized incident involving Harrison Burton. He spun out and collected a couple of trucks. And then you had arguably the most influential to the race incident, where it was Grant Enfinger and Brandon Jones.
Yeah, yeah.
They ended up Enfinger, he ended up getting a little bit too loose coming off the corner, in the center of the corner coming off, and Brandon Jones was right on top, and they collided. They hit the wall hard. Brandon Jones, while he was on fire, I don't know if he had control of the truck or not, but he ends up coming down and spinning Enfinger out, and they both end up in the grass out of the race. And definitely two of the trucks that could have won that race out at the end of stage two. The stage ended up pretty much running under caution the entire time, and Matt Crafton ended up winning that stage. And then you go into stage three, and it runs caution free pretty much the entire time. And that's what set up that end run, that those last 74 laps where they just ran the entire rest of the race green. It set up for a very incredible finish, especially for Tyler Ankrum, who is the first-time winner at Kentucky Speedway this weekend.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head what happened with Sheldon Creed, if that was before or after the end of stage two. But I'm pretty sure it was during stage three, because they didn't throw a caution for it. But he ends up spinning, putting himself into the wall, and they just kept going. So it's a tough break for Creed. But Ankrum came out the leader to start stage three. And man, they've talked about it the last few years. Apparently the dirty air in the trucks is the worst of any series. That's including this new cup package. And it really showed, because man, I don't know if Ankrum had the truck to beat, but anytime that Ben Rhodes got right on him, he would lose about 2 or 3 tenths. He'd fall back to about 6 or 7 tenths back, come right back to his rear end and then lose another 2 or 3 tenths. It was just lather, rinse, repeat. And then you got Moffitt that comes into the mix, passes Rhodes, and really makes it a decent race for the lead. And then the one really interesting thing was that some of these guys pitted. Some of these guys pitted for fuel a little bit later than the rest of the field, like Ankrum, Rhodes, who stayed up front. They all pitted, I think it was like 10 or 12 laps later. And that set up Moffitt really, really well. He was about 6, 7, 8 seconds ahead of Ankrum before he had to start saving. And it set up for, I thought it was going to be a pretty boring finish because, okay, you think he already had to pit, he didn't have to fill it all the way with fuel. He saves all that time, gets a huge lead against Ankrum, who pretty much had to fill it all the way up, and the race is over. Well, then we start hearing crew chiefs and reports from the pit crews that they're short. Well, how are they short? They should know already how much fuel they need, and they should have some insurance in the bank, especially where this is it. This is the last pit stop you're going to make, and it looks like it's going green. So we start hearing teams, oh, we're 2 laps short, start saving. So Moffitt starts saving, and he's losing. It was about a second a lap. So he started saving with about 15 to go, and he starts losing about a second a lap. And I'll let you take it away because it gets really interesting here at the end.
Yeah, so Moffitt's losing all that time, and he had, I'd say at one point he did have about over a 10-second lead, and
It was
then
nuts.
like you said, it was he was going on and he was cruising to victory. Moffitt starts losing that, and it gets down to about maybe 6-5 seconds, and it's still looking pretty good for him if he can continue to save, and that gap just keeps shrinking and shrinking, and Akram's good. He pitted, he filled it all the way up, and Moffitt, you think he's going to be able to save? He's the defending truck champion, but all of a sudden, 2 laps to go, coming off the corner, Moffitt out of gas. He's on the inside of the track, and Ankrum just shoots right on by. And he said it in Victory Lane or in a post-race interview or something. He said he forgot to breathe those last couple laps because he was so like nervous about that whole situation. Not only did Moffitt run out, but Crafton also ran out of gas. So you had two of the top guys that their strategy just didn't work out, and all of a sudden you got this kid. He just turned 18 years old earlier this season. He couldn't race in the first 3 races of the season because he wasn't old enough. He got a waiver from NASCAR saying, okay, we're going to waive the you have to start every race rule, but you have to start every race from this point forward, and if you win and you're in the top 20, then you can be eligible for the points. And we've been talking all these past couple weeks about Ross Chastain. Move over, Ross. We're talking about Tyler Ankrum right now because he's now in the playoffs, and he's got one hell of a story to back him up. He didn't have a ride for a couple of races because he ran out of sponsorship. One of his sponsors backed out, and he had a start and park in the 87 truck just to keep his eligibility alive. Nice. And he comes out on this Thursday night in Kentucky, and he didn't luck into it. He was there. He, like you said, he started the final stage as the leader. He led all the way up until he pitted, and because of his strategy, that put him in the winner's circle. Moffitt used strategy to get around him, but it didn't work out for him because he didn't have enough fuel to maintain that gap, and that's why we had the finish that we had at Kentucky Speedway. Tyler Ankrum as the winner. Stuart Friesen, who he had a hell of a day too. Incredible finish in second place, and Harrison Burton running out the top 3 in third.
Yeah, Harrison Burton in third is actually pretty surprising because he got turned pretty much to start stage 2 after the Decker and Spencer Boyd wreck. So what a rebound by him. What a rebound by Friesen, just because, and we didn't really talk about it to start off. Friesen lost his primary truck to start the weekend because of something with the interior of the car. There's a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me that have explained it ad nauseum on the internet. So I'm sure you can find something, but it's something to do with the interior of the car, something to do with placement of all the underbody and all this and that. But he pretty much he started the weekend on a backup truck, and yeah, it's a GMS truck, but these guys are not. It's not. They're not Cup. So I mean, they're bringing their best stuff for their primary, and they're doing it for every truck that they have. So a backup is what it really is. It's a backup. It's a second-rate truck. So for him to finish in the top three is pretty impressive. But man, what a run by Ankrum. Ankrum has been just so interesting and so intriguing ever since he showed up at Texas. Comes in, finishes sixth, comes in and really puts on a decent showing in that 17 truck, and that's his second race ever in the truck series. It's the fifth race of the season, but it's the second race ever. And then he backs it up again at Texas. They've run this weird schedule. I don't know why they do it like this, but finishes third at Texas. So they have DGR Crosley has the speeds figured out at these mile and a halves. And then I mean I'm not gonna. I think it's pretty obvious that there were definitely trucks better than him at some point during this race. Moffitt was fast. You had Sheldon Creed, Grant Enfinger, Brandon Jones. All were really fast, but from a strategy standpoint and matching that up and backing it up with speed and keeping the truck out front in clean air, he ran an absolutely perfect race. Moffitt, I don't even know why they worried so much about filling it up with as little fuel as possible. They should have added another 2 or 3 seconds. He had a 10, I think it was a 13-second gap. If I look back, I think it was 13 seconds over Ankrum specifically. And it's really, you would think a team that has a former champion, has the resources that they do, they would have known better than to cut it that close, because he did have a better truck than Ankrum. Even if he comes out a second or two behind Ankrum, I think he could have passed him at some point, because he was right there with Rhodes and Ankrum that entire run, and they shut themselves in the foot. But we're talking about, and what's cool is Academy Sports came on for this truck, and that's a well-known brand. So it seems to me that DGR Crosley with Gilliland and now Ankrum slowly but surely becoming a young and I think this is going to catapult him into one of the more popular roles in the sport, because it's the ultimate upset for a lot of people. It's a huge boost for him from a sponsor standpoint. I think he'll be just fine, but we're talking about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were talking about Iowa. We were talking about Gateway. He wasn't even in the 17. He was driving for Joe Nemechek's truck for Nemco. And now I think Gilliland's going to have no choice but to put Ankrum in the car or in the truck full time, because now he's going to be in the playoffs.
Well, definitely during the playoffs. I don't know what their sponsorship situation is going forward for the rest of the season. We've still got 10 races to go for the rest of the season. So I don't know if now they're going to move some races around with some sponsors to make sure that he is in that 17 truck, or at least in a DGR Crosley truck for the remainder for the entire playoffs at least. Because he's now the fifth driver to be locked in the playoffs. Looking at the standings, he's pretty, I would say he's pretty locked in at this point. He's got more than 100 points over 20th place at least. So he shouldn't have any issue with falling out, even if he were to start and park. Let's say that, they move around the sponsorship and they put him in the 87 truck, the 3 weeks leading up to the playoffs. If that's what it takes, I don't think that they're going to have any issue with the point situation. I think he'll still be able to lock in with that. One of the interesting things that is worth noting is, and I knew this, but I forgot it, but we run the same rule in FTF, so I don't know why I forgot it. The points series the regular season champion for the point series before the playoffs.
Get
He
bonus points, right?
Well, not only does he get bonus points, but he gets locked in whether he gets a win or not. So right now that's Grant Enfinger, and he does not have a win. And there are 3 races left, and we've had 5 winners. So the scenario still exists where a winner might not make it in to the playoffs. Right now, that person would be Ross Chastain because he is 18th in the point standings. He's 90 points behind Tyler Ankrum. So, I mean, they could play it where, Ankrum starting Parks in the 87 the next couple weeks because of sponsorship. But if Ross passes him and they get 3 more winners and Grant Enfinger's not one of them and Grant Enfinger wins the season championship, we could be talking about, maybe Ankrum not being in the playoffs or Ross not being in the playoffs. You don't know these things. It's still up in the air. Nothing is set in stone. Another thing worth noting, and I brought it up before, Harrison Burton, he got a 3rd place finish. Stuart Friesen got a 2nd place finish, but Stuart Friesen also got his truck taken away. And we don't know what the penalty is going to be for that, if there's going to be a penalty. Right now, Stuart Friesen, he is 2nd in the standings on its own, and he's got it looks like 60-point advantage over Harrison Burton, who's the first person outside of the cutoff. If they penalize Stuart Friesen anywhere up to 60 points, I mean that's a full race, and NASCAR's well within their right to do that, depending on the severity of the infraction. We could be talking about, if we don't get any new winners, the battle for 8th place between Friesen, between Crafton, between Burton. I think Enfinger's in a very good spot right now, regardless. Even with his incident with Brandon Jones, he's still got a 34-point lead over Stuart Friesen, and I am expecting a penalty to come from this because NASCAR doesn't just take your primary truck away without consequences. It's just not something that they've ever done. So I'm looking forward to see how the penalty report comes out, either tomorrow, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or whenever it does come out, to see what happens with Friesen, because it was, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. The Truck Series playoffs is so interesting because anybody can win on any given race. And Ankrum, I'm not saying that he's not talented enough to be in victory lane, but it was definitely an upset. Nobody expected him to be there. And he completely shook this championship picture up, because you would have thought that it would have been Ben Rhodes in. And now Ben Rhodes is out. He's not even the first person out. He's the second person out. And he was looking pretty well, into it.
Great. He was well into it. Now he's in trouble.
So yeah, it's definitely turned itself upside down in the Truck Series, and it's I mentioned it before too. They only take 8 into the playoffs, whereas the Xfinity Series takes 12 and the Cup Series takes 16. I would love to see the Xfinity Series actually take their number down, because then it would make it more interesting for them as well, whether it be 8 or 10. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, either way would be pretty interesting. But I'm definitely looking forward to the next 3 races that they got. They're going to have Pocono. They're going to have, I believe, Eldora. And I want to say that they got Michigan. And those are the 3 races that they got left in the regular season before we go to their first playoff race, which is, I want to say, isn't it Canada? It's Mosport, isn't it?
I think it's Mosport, which is awesome. I love that they're kind of leading by example and putting Mosport in the playoffs. It's shaping up to be really nice, and I think Eldora is one of those tracks where it's going to be like a good and bad thing that Stuart Friesen is really good there for Grant Enfinger. because I think if Stewart wins there, he the kind of the pressure comes off of Enfinger with that regular season championship. I think it kind of just takes that away. I think Friesen's going to be the favorite, but the defending champion and Chase Briscoe announced that he's going to be running in the 27 this year, defend his title. So it's shaping up. The Truck Series is the most entertaining playoff scenario right now, just because it's not a matter of not a lot of people are involved, and it's not like Xfinity where the field is set. We've got, I mean, we're talking about Tyler Ankrum, Ross Chastain becoming real, and Austin Hill. He's run decent this year, but by all means, he's not a title contender. These guys have got wins, and a lot of people, a lot of drivers that we expected more from them do not, and it's becoming a huge factor. Which I think that's what this whole format is designed to do. It's to design the idea that yeah, running really really well on the points is obviously gonna matter, but I don't know if they anticipated. Yeah, you have to finish second in regular season points, or you're going to get kicked out. It's pretty crazy that the guy who's going to be, I think, where's Harrison? He's right now fifth. He's fifth in points. He's only got two. It's a 2 race gap, pretty much, give or take, with the 60 points in total. It's a really close gap, and then you got Rhodes 4 points back. So it's shaping up to be really really intriguing, and I mean we got 3 really interesting races. Pocono is always a wild card just because it all depends on who nails the setup. Eldora is obviously insane, and then Michigan is for the most part the way these trucks race. It's going to be basically a super speedway for about 50% of the race. So it's going to be really intriguing to see if someone else like maybe a Brendan Poole or someone can steal a win from somebody and get involved in as a spoiler, or even someone like Spencer Boyd. He's 14th in points. He could steal a win. He's eligible to be in this championship. So I mean, it's going to be a really really entertaining 3 races, and I think it's what NASCAR wanted with this format.
Yeah, looking on the outside, Harrison Burton, Ben Rhodes, Todd Gilliland, Sheldon Creed, Tyler Dipple, Brennan Poole, Spencer Boyd. Those are all guys that I feel that, given the right circumstances, could find themselves in victory lane. If the things went right and things went wrong for other people, or a pit strategy. I mean, we're going up to Pocono, not this weekend, but next weekend, and we all remember the fog that, ended the race early and put Chris Buescher in the playoffs for the Cup Series. Who's to say that can't happen for the Truck Series? You never know. So, I'm looking forward to it too. Eldora, yeah, we look at Friesen, like you said. We look at Rhodes, not Rhodes, we look at Briscoe. But I mean, yeah, we could look at Rhodes. We could look at Crafton. Anybody could win at Eldora too, though, because
Crafton's good at dirt. He's had dirt late model experience. He ran in that Prelude a bunch of times when Tony Stewart would run it. So I mean, he's got dirt experience. He's a favorite every year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Eldora because that's always like one of the best races of the season. And Michigan, we saw Bubba Wallace win there a couple of years ago, and I'm not saying anything bad about Bubba, but I mean he hadn't been in a truck. He could come in, anybody could come in there and win in any right circumstance. He was driving the 99 truck at the time. I don't remember who it was for, but I mean it wasn't a race winning team normally. I'm just saying that these next 3 races we could get 3 different winners. Who knows? And I'm very excited to see how it all plays out. But that was the Truck Series race. That was Thursday night. Let's start talking about what happened on Friday night. That was the Xfinity Series race, also at Kentucky, and it had a much different feel than what we had on the prior night. Um, it was it definitely brought a different flavor to the table.
It brought the well. First off, something we didn't even touch about was the track conditions with the PJ1. This was the first race that I think really utilized it to its fullest potential because you had two distinct grooves in both corners, and as the race progressed, we really started to see the likes of Cole Custer use it really, really well. And he even mentioned as he used it, it started to wear out and it started to make him start trying different lines. But he and Bell just killed the field. It was a completely different race than what we had in trucks. Once again, it's ironic. The top four in this race are the top four who have won this year. You had Custer, you had Bell, you had Reddick about 15 seconds back, and then you had Annette, which, once again, I said it a couple weeks ago. Michael Annette, what a turnaround year. You want to talk about comeback ever? Like comeback of the year or most improved driver, whatever they want to give him, whatever award they want to pretend to give him, he's got it because he paced the field for JRM. He's starting to emerge as a possible fourth guy. I don't think he's there yet, but he's coming. He's coming. He's fast every week. He's consistent every week, and it's starting to show that JRM is here to play. But with a guy that we didn't even think about to start 2019. But that being said, Cole Custer is on a freaking roll, and I've doubted him in the past, and he's had moments where I just don't think he's worthy of being in that car. He's got money because of his dad. Um, he's in that ride because of his dad, but man, he is proving he should be there. He's beating what I think is the most pure talent in that series in Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick. He's coming. He's either got a really, really, really good car in comparison to the two, or he's got the talent to match them. And he straight up spanked him. It was an absolute just beat down on Friday night.
In the third stage, you gotta remember that Custer really didn't come into play until the nighttime. For Custer, the nighttime was the right time. Christopher Bell was the dominant car to begin the race. He won both stages. He won stage 1 and stage 2. And he, I unfortunately I had a very long day on Saturday, so I didn't get to see the first two stages. I didn't get to see Bell's dominance. I didn't get to see how well he did in the sun. But when that sun went down, and when I opened my eyes, it was Cole Custer in the lead, and he was just running away with it at that point. Those two were definitely the two to beat. If a caution would have come out, I would have been interested to see if Bell would have been able to do anything. I know on the final pit stop, Bell ended up pitting 3 laps prior to Custer, and had he enough time on the track and the right circumstances, and if he was able to get around Custer, we might be talking about Christopher Bell sweeping the day or the night. But Custer he was able to beat Bell and hold him off and pull away from that point. Talking about Cole Custer's talent level, I remember back when he started truck racing, and he was racing for Junior Motorsports in the 00 truck. He showed like so many moments of just absolute brilliance on the track. He won that race at New Hampshire. I've always believed in Cole Custer. Even when he got to the Xfinity Series and he wasn't winning, yeah, he won at Homestead at the end of his rookie campaign in 2017, and he won a race later in the playoffs in 2018. So he only had 2 career wins coming into this season. Even then, I still knew that given the right circumstances, this kid does have talent. He has talent, and I believe they were talking about it on the radio earlier today. He's definitely grown both as a driver and as a man over the last couple of years, where he's coming out of his shell. He's got that whole cold Custer review going on now. I like people have, I don't want to say like, but they kind of like made fun of his name because it sounds so similar, and he's taken that with stride, and he's turned it into a very fun program on social media. And I don't think the old cold Custer back in 2016, before he got the full time ride with the Double Zero and Xfinity Series, I don't think he would have been willing to do that. I think he was very quiet, very shy, um, you know, very I just want to go out there and race. But there's more to racing than just racing. You got to have the personality, and he's coming into that, and I love to see it. He on Friday night, for the parts that I saw, it was incredible. He led 88 laps, and that was, looking at the list here, that was all in pretty much the second half of the race.
Right.
He led one lap before halfway, and I'm sure that was during like a caution or a pit sequence. Oh, it was at the end of stage 2. He led a lap during the stage break. Once they got the stage going again, he led 41 laps at one point, pitted, and then came back and led the remaining 46. And just absolutely put on a clinic after he started in 5th, and was about he was up there, but he was about a mid, top 5, top 10 car until it turned into the night. So Cole Custer definitely impressing now with his 5th win of the season, which is the most in the series so far in the 2019 season.
It's going to be, I think I say it every week, it's going to be an interesting battle between these three. Reddick, uh, I wouldn't say he's fallen off. I mean, he finished third. I mean, that's still pretty impressive. He's got the highest average finish by a country mile over everyone else. So he's got insane consistency, and that does matter. He's the series leader in points, and he's got 3 wins, and he's got 14 top 10s, and he's got 12 top 5s. I mean, he's obviously still a threat, but it seems like it's become a two-man show the last 2 or 3 weeks. We saw Reddick almost win Pocono, and that was about the last time we really saw him show a real great performance. I mean, he obviously, you got things like he qualified on the pole at Daytona, but that's a completely different style of race. He did win at Michigan after the Pocono race, but we're talking 15th place at Iowa, 9th at Chicago. Once again, Daytona, which is just an absolute. You might as well throw a double-sided die or 20-sided die twice, and that'll be your finish. It's pretty much a wild card, but it's definitely become, the momentum is in Cole Custer's court, and it was a weird night for Reddick because he was really quick after about 40 laps. And the way these races are, you cannot have long run speed anymore. The tires don't wear out. It's pretty much, I think both Reddick or both Custer, and I could be wrong on this. I'm pretty sure Custer and Bell both took 2 tires. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it seemed that was the trend of the whole entire weekend, was that the left side tires really didn't wear at all. And they really didn't matter once the tires heated up. So long run speed, so they just completely missed it in the 2 machine, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they bounce back, because I mean, I'm talking about a slump. He's got 3 wins, and it's just weird to say that a guy that has 3 wins is in a slump. Bell's had some really weird luck, and I think that's why he's only got 4 wins. I think he's honestly, that Gibbs car is, in my opinion, I think it's the best equipment that shows up on Thursday or Wednesday or Friday, whenever they decide to show up for Xfinity. I think out the door, he's got the best equipment, just because of the prep and the amount of sponsors they have. But it I'm I'm curious to ask you, and I think we're going to do this every week. If you had to pick someone right now to win the championship out of those three, because I think it's pretty obvious it's going to be one of those three, who do you have now, and why don't you pick the other two?
Well, I mean, if we're talking right here, right now, Cole Custer's got the momentum on his side. He's got the wins in a row. He's got the drive right now. He's figured something out where he's able to get himself into victory lane more times than Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick. Right now, Reddick's leading the point standings, and Christopher Bell's ahead of Custer in the points. So if you look at it based on points, Custer's actually the lower of the three. But I'm thinking Homestead. Custer's won there before. He said it in an interview where Reddick has really made these guys have to think about having to drive the high line, and I feel like Custer's been working on that. And if they were to go to Homestead tomorrow and put those three on the track with everybody else battling for the championship, I think Cole Custer would have the momentum on his side to be able to go out and become the 2019 Xfinity Series champion. But that's my take on it. What do you have an opinion on that one?
Yeah, I do think Custer's definitely up there. I think Bell is the odd man out just because of the way you got to drive Homestead. Homestead's huge, and I think it's still Reddick's race to lose, just because these hiccups are at tracks that are a little bit different than Homestead. I think the 9 car from last year for Reddick is not as good as what he has now. He's got a Childress car, barring it's a Childress car, but it pretty much is their only full-time ride, and they're putting 100% effort into that setup every single week. And I've yet to see uh, Custer out drive Reddick without Reddick making a mistake. You had the turn three at Pocono. That's Reddick's only error this year, in my opinion, that he's made, and it's been his fault that he's lost a race. Everything else has been circumstance. Uh, I still think it's Reddick's race and his championship to lose. He's ridiculously consistent, and that consistency allows their team to not necessarily keep the momentum, because you're right, Custer has the momentum, and he's going to be really tough to beat at the mile and a half. And I think it's going to be a two-man race at Homestead. Whoever can get that high line rolling, especially as it goes into the dark, is who's going to win the championship. And I think it's still going to be Reddick. I have to see more. And like I said, I want this to be a weekly thing. If Custer's momentum continues and he starts racking off win number 6 and win number 7, I think my opinion will change. But as of now, it is Reddick for me.
Do you think there's? I know you kind of briefly touched upon it before, but do you think there's a fourth man in this battle? Like, and even if there is a fourth man, do you think they have a Joey Logano type of shot?
It has to be someone else. Michael Annette's a great story. He's blasting off top tens like crazy, and he's doing really really well. I don't think he's quite there yet in terms of uh, winning a skill track per se. He has a win at Daytona. I think it's going to have to be someone like Chase Briscoe or a Justin Allgaier. I think those are the two that come off the top of my head that have a really good shot. I would say someone like Brandon Jones, just because he's been really quick lately. But we kind of talked about it a little bit before we went on the air. His luck that he creates for himself isn't necessarily good luck. He had a lot of tough breaks this week alone. He got wrecked in both races. Uh, in the lead, funny enough, he had issues in the lead for both races, and I don't think those were his fault. But you find luck the way you make it. So it, it's going to have to be, I think, someone like Allgaier, someone who's been there before, or someone like Briscoe, who he's shown flashes of speed this year, just as fast as Custer, but He's just not quite there yet. So I mean, it's either going to be one of those two, in my opinion. I just don't see anyone else having a legitimate chance to give them a run for their money. Cindric is still too raw. He's a road racer turn oval racer. He's still got a ways to go. In my opinion, he should be winning races, and he's not even close. And I think it's because of the talent gap. So I think it's going to have to be someone like Allgaier or even Briscoe to come through.
I can concur with that. I would of course lean more towards Allgaier just because he's got that experience, and like you said, he's been there before, um, and he's got, he's driven Homestead well, in past years, just not championship winning well. I think that right now the 7 car team, they're kind of in a slump because they haven't won a race yet this season. They haven't. I don't want to say they haven't been close, but they've been like, it's been those 3, and then the rest of the field. And I feel like the 7 cars kind of been the best of the rest for a majority of these races. Whether they have bad luck or good luck or whatever happens, he's 5th in the points right now. I'd say he's got a pretty good shot at being the 4th man going into Homestead. I just don't know if even if he gets there, if it's going to be enough for any of those big 3 that is currently, setting the field on fire, week in and week out. Looking at the rest of this, for the Xfinity Series, I mean, it was a good race, and I watched some highlights too. We only had 5 cars finish on the lead lap though, which is insane. Thinking about, like, they had a full field of 38, and they ran. I'm having a hard time putting my thoughts together tonight. Completely honest. But it was, I enjoyed the racing that I got to see. I enjoyed the highlights that I got to see as well. And even though there was domination, I felt like the racing that there was, it still produced a good show. It was a much different flavor than the previous night or the night, after, the Saturday night race. They were all 3 distinct races that all put on their own performance, and they were all fun to watch. And I enjoy watching these 3, Custer, Bell, and Reddick. All 3 of them just tearing up the field right now. Just absolutely amazing to watch. Didn't think we'd see anything like this in the Xfinity Series, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all plays out for the rest of the year. They're getting close to their playoffs as well. Their playoffs actually start the latest out of all of them, where they're going to be going. They only have a 7-race playoff as well, so they're not going to start their playoffs until Richmond, which is in September. So they still got New Hampshire, Iowa, Watkins Glen, Mid-Ohio, Bristol, Road America, Darlington, Indianapolis, and Las Vegas. So they still got 9 more races until their playoffs begin. I think the top 12 is pretty much set, and I don't think anybody outside the top 12 is going to break free. It's just going to come down to who's got the most playoff points going into the playoffs, who's got, the momentum on their side, and it's going to be interesting to see who, because I think the 3 are pretty well set. It's going to be interesting to see if there's a 4th person, and it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to have anything for those other 3.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, if I'm remembering correctly, it's 15, 10, and then 5, right, for the season bonus, or is it just 15 and then that's it?
No, it trickles down through the top 10. It'll go 15 to the winner of the regular season championship. It'll go 10 to second place, and then it'll go 8 as normal. 8 to third place, 7 to fourth, 6 to fifth, and 5 to sixth, and so on and so forth, all the way through 10th place. So they'll get those bonus points that they'll be able to take with them from round to round to round. So you know, there's still points on the line right now. Yeah, Reddick has a pretty good advantage over the other two. It's what is it, 67 points over Bell, so that's more than a race that Reddick has for those extra 15 points. But Reddick also has the least amount of wins of the three drivers. So yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, it balances out really nice, actually. Pretty much the top three are going to be all on top of each other just because Custer has an extra win than Bell, but he's got a 2 point less advantage on the points from a standing standpoint, but he has one more playoff point because of the wins. It's going to be really exciting. I guess we can talk about, unless you have anything else, Cup, but with the way the schedule comes out, the only thing I can see is maybe a road course upset, barring anything crazy. I think you're right. The top 12 is pretty much set.
Yeah, let's move on to the Cup Series race, which definitely had the finish of the weekend.
Oh yeah.
It was, and I'm gonna come out right here and say it. The package worked for Kentucky. It made this the best Kentucky race that we've ever had. Is it what the future is? No, I still don't believe it.
I hope not.
But it was still honestly the best Kentucky race that since the Cup Series started coming to Kentucky that we've ever seen, and definitely one of the best finishes of the season, if not the best finish of the season. They ran into overtime and it was a Bush brothers battle, but we'll get to that. We started off in at Kentucky, and it was a Bush night, honestly. The very first stage was won by Kurt Busch. He was able to hold off Logano and his brother to win that first stage. There was, I think there were a couple cautions there.
Yeah, because Suarez led the first, I think, 45 or 48 laps, and then he took four tires, and that was the last we ever heard of Suarez. So clearing error definitely mattered because he became pretty irrelevant. And Kurt decided to play a little strategy, and he won the stage.
Didn't Suarez have a penalty at some point, and that's kind of what took him out of the contention, or was it just a bad pit stop? I can't remember.
I know for stage one, he just took four tires because he was 14th on the restart and he finished about the same place, even though he had four brand new tires and the guys in front of him either had two or zero new tires. So, and I made a tweet about it, just being so frustrated because I hate that they bring such a hard tire here. When I heard that like there is some good tire degradation possible with the way the surface is constructed. So I remember that, but I don't know if he had any kind of issue as far as pits later. I can look that up while you recap stuff. But yeah, Kurt won stage one, which was cool, which was nice.
Yep. So the first caution was brought out by Chase Elliott, who blew a tire, put some debris down. That's when Suarez, who, as you mentioned, he led the first 49 laps of the event. That's when they all came in and pitted. Suarez gave up the lead to Keselowski, and on the ensuing restart, it was Kurt Busch who ended up taking the lead, and he would lead all the way up until the end of the stage. There was two more cautions before the end of the stage where Corey LaJoie had brought out the caution by spinning out of turn 4, and then there was an accident involving Landon Castle and the 51 of Bailey Curry. I honestly I don't remember that incident that well at all.
Me neither, to be honest.
But it happened, and either way, Kurt Busch continued to lead through the restarts and was able to hold on, and with his strategy, he held on to win the first stage. That's when we ended up getting some more strategy, some more people taking different pit calls and taking no tires, two tires, whatever it took to get them, because track position was pretty key during the majority of the race. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. ended up leading the field to the green in stage 2, and he led for 21 laps before he ended up giving that up to Kyle Busch, who Kyle Busch, of course, we know, very talented driver. He was able to work through the aero push and through the the tire wear and whatnot to be able to get to the lead. And Kyle Busch led pretty much until the end of stage number 2. Stage 2 ended at lap 160, and Kyle Busch led those last 59 laps. He short pitted, if I'm not mistaken, and he was able to use that to his advantage to hold off Eric Jones and just put himself in the position to cruise to that stage victory. And that's kind of when it started getting a little bit more interesting, because we in the second half we had a lot more green flag racing as well, but we had a lot more lead changes as well, just because different pit strategies and whatnot going on. Stage 3 starts up, lap 167. You got Clint Bowyer taking the field to the lead. He was alongside Kurt Busch, so it was Bowyer and Busch at the front. They battled for a little bit. Kurt Busch ended up taking the lead at lap 205 until there was an accident. I forgot to mention that Jimmy Johnson ended up hitting the wall and spinning out at lap 180. But regardless, Bowyer continued to lead through that restart. Kurt Busch took the lead, like I said, lap 205. And then it was his brother Kyle who took the lead at 213. And he would lead before we started getting into the different pit strategies going on. So Busch pits, Hamlin takes the lead. Hamlin pits, Newman takes the lead. Newman pits, Suarez takes the lead. And then you've got Joey Logano that's now coming to the picture. And it's going to be between Joey Logano and Kurt Busch. So before Suarez pits, right now it's looking like Kyle Busch is going to be going on. But Logano's just creeping in. And Logano ends up passing Kyle Busch because Busch is just way too tight right now. Logano ends up passing him, and then when Suarez pits to give up the lead, it's now Logano who's the leader. And we're coming down to it. There's, about 20 laps to go at this point when Logano gets the lead. Logano's he's cruising. He's pulling as far away from Kyle Busch as he can. Kyle can't do anything. His crew chief's telling him, come on, don't give up. Keep going. You got this. But it just looks like Logano's just going to go on and cruise to victory. And then we get the final caution, and it's Bubba Wallace loses a tire just before the end of the race at lap 262. They go into overtime, and now we've got all those differing strategies all bunched up together. You got Logano, you got Busch, you got the other Busch, you got Jones, and they're all starting 1, 2, 3, 4. And Kurt Busch gets the restart of his life. He gets on the outside of his brother, his brother actually goes to the inside. So it's Kyle on the inside, then it's Joe in the middle, and it's Kurt on the outside. Kurt got a push from his teammate in the 42, Kyle Larson. Kurt ends up clearing Logano, but not clearing his brother. And then Eric Jones is in the equation. Eric tries to go low, but Eric can't really do much there. He's not able to grip anything on the very bottom line. So now it's Kyle versus Kurt in these last 2 overtime laps. Coming off of turn 4, Kurt's got a slight advantage. Kyle doesn't want to give it to him. Kyle comes up. They make some contact coming to the white flag. And going into turn 1, you start seeing Kurt's tire start smoking. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, oh my goodness, these two brothers, they just made contact. Kurt's going to end up blowing a tire before this race is over. I can't wait to hear the post-race, how mad he's going to be. Tire holds up. It was smoking. He holds up. Kurt's not giving up. Kyle's got the advantage off the corner, but Kurt, he pushes in the gas, and he doesn't let his brother clear him, which was key. Kurt ends up pulling side by side on the backstretch. They go into 3. Kyle kind of shoves it in there as deep as he can go, but he still doesn't clear Kurt. Or if he did, it was slight.
Close.
It was very close. Kurt gassed it up in the center of the corner and gets back to the outside. And coming off of turn 4, they make more contact. And it was incredible to watch. Kurt ends up getting the advantage off the corner, using the side draft, using the arrow to his advantage. And Kurt Busch becomes the 9th different winner in 2019, defeating his brother Kyle in, like I said, what could be the best finish of the season. It was so fun to watch, and I enjoyed it. It was definitely a positive look for Kentucky, where the entire NASCAR industry has been very critical of Kentucky ever since it's gone on the Cup schedule for a number of reasons, and they proved us that this package works at Kentucky to a point. It was definitely the best race that I've ever seen at Kentucky.
Yeah, it was one of those things where you know what to expect when you come into this race. It's not going to be the best. And I brought it up earlier. The PJ1 made this race. I really think it did. If they didn't do anything to create a second lane, this might have been one of the worst races of the year. But the fact that they could create a second groove, and at some points they would create a third groove, and it allowed them to get out of the dirty air, and it allowed for some passing, and it allowed for them to have the opportunity to get some good air to their nose. And it really showed that, I mean, regardless of the tire, like I said, I hated the way the tires did not wear in this race, but it did allow for some intriguing strategy. You had Boyer come out of nowhere because of it, and he maintained the lead for a long time. And there was a point where Kurt Busch was behind him, Logano was behind him, Kyle was right behind him, and it created some really intriguing racing. Obviously, once Kurt got by, the field pretty much let him in the dust, and it became once Kurt kind of was left out of the equation, it became a two horse race. But wow, what a finish! And the one thing that the Gen 6 does, I criticize it to death. I hate the car. It's still, like I said, one of the worst decisions ever, aside from putting Brian France as top of the board as far as CEO. But uh, the one thing this car can do and is side draft, and it creates a really dynamic style of racing on restarts. And the one thing that this package does is create some of the wildest restarts we will see ever. I don't necessarily support this style of racing from here on out. If the Gen 7 races at the same speeds, fine. If it creates the restarts like this, I'm 100% for it. But I hope with the Gen 7 we get some kind of racing like this. But it's a matter of the cars are really close, but they can kind of control their own destiny. The dirty area isn't as big of a deal. And I'm starting to get a little bit pessimistic because of the things I'm hearing from the likes of Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell, but there's a lot of intricate pieces that it's coming together. One thing we'll talk about a little bit with Goodyear, it's looking like it's a success at these mile and a halves, regardless of if you like the dirty air or not. I know a good friend of ours, Derek Justice, was at the race, and he said it was one of the craziest races he's ever seen at that track. He goes every year. He's gone since 2011, if I know correctly, and it definitely created, undoubtedly, with maybe an exception. I think the year Bush won, I forget. I think it was 2015. It was a good battle for the win, and it was really exciting for Kentucky. This was definitely the best race that they could have had here. The one thing that I wish they start doing is figuring out if they can bring a softer tire, because I think it would have made the racing even better. Because if it created uh, if the softer tire was there, I think it would have rubbered in the bottom a lot more than it did. And I think the second and third groove would have become a more viable option, even with the PJ1 wearing off as the race went on. I think they need to explore that next year, if they can. If they bring the same tire because of cost, I understand the racing was okay. But I really want them to bring a softer tire, because it does seem like the softer tires do work. as far as some comers and goers. Because honestly, the only two guys that could really solidly pass was Kyle Busch, which is how he got to the front by passing Stenhouse, and Joey Logano. Other than that, it was pretty much a strategy call as far as where you would finish. And it's nice to see a little bit different dynamic and bringing the pit crews and the crew chiefs involved. But I want to see these guys race. I want to see them race, and I want to see them be able to put their car where they want to, not because of dirty air, but because they know it sticks there the best. So I'm hoping this kind of racing, I love it as far as the aesthetic of it. They're close and they're side by side a lot, and they're getting runs, and it's cool. But I really want this clean air thing to go away if it's possible. But in the meantime, once again, Kentucky delivered a decent race. Great finish, and I think that helped a lot because if Joey Logano just pulled away, I think we would have said, "Oh, it was an above average Kentucky race, better than what we've seen in the past." But it wasn't the most exciting. But we got a really good finish, and it's something that could happen at any other track this year. The way these cars draft, and I hope we get to see more of it in the future.
I'm looking at the loop data for the race. And I normally don't look at the stats because I like what I see, in front of me. That's not always a fair assessment, though, because of the way that some of these races are broadcast by the broadcast partners. So I'm looking, and there are well over 1,000 quality passes in this race. And quality passes, for anybody who doesn't know, are passes for position in the top 15 under green flag conditions. So there are well over, for the entire field, over 1,000 quality passes between everybody who was racing in that field. If I go to last year's numbers and I look at the loop data stats for that, the quality passes is much, much lower. Hell, I don't even think they break 200 for the quality passes. So definitely there was definitely a lot more racing going on. And like you said, Derek was at the race, and he goes pretty much every year. I'm sure he saw that, and I'm sure if I was at Kentucky, I would be able to see that too. If I was watching from like the press box, like it will be this weekend at New Hampshire. Being at the track is a lot different than watching it on TV, because you get to watch what you want to watch at the track. Like you're not being told what to watch like you are having to watch it on a broadcast partner, NBC or Fox. So you get to pick and see what you want to see. If they're racing 3 wide for 25th and they're not showing it on TV, well, you've got it right in front of you in your face, and you can watch it and watch the craziness ensue. So, like I said, I normally don't look at the loop statistics, but I feel like that's a big difference between year over year. And I felt like even though the broadcast may not have shown it fully, I felt like you could still feel the presence of that happening throughout the race. So just a nugget that I wanted to throw in there that was interesting to me. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is the points battle. Looking through this, looking at the top 20 as we go into the pretty much the home stretch at this point. We've got 7 races left before the playoffs begin in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series, and the points race for the top 16 is one of the most intriguing ones that we've had in a number of years, where there are guys who could win races that are, on the bubble or on the outside. I think Daniel Suarez, if he's in the right situation, he definitely showed that he could go up and lead the race this weekend by leading those first 49 laps. And given the right circumstances, I feel like he's in the equipment to get it done and could win a race. But, he's right now right now he's not going to be competing for a championship. He's 18th in the standings. He's 4 points out from being able to do that. Eric Jones holds that bubble position in 16th place, 2 points over Ryan Newman, who, go back to the 2014, the first year of this happening, this type of playoff format happening. Newman almost won the damn championship. So, Newman gets in, he could point his way up. You never know. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has won races before. He's not really in the points equation, but given the right circumstances for him, he could end up in victory lane. Paul Menard's won at Indianapolis before, and that's the last race of the regular season. So I'm looking at like all these guys in the top 20, and then guys that are outside the top 20, like Austin Dillon. Dillon could, he's lucked into a few wins before. He could definitely do so as well. So at that bubble area where you got Clint Boyer, Jimmy Johnson, Eric Jones, Ryan Newman, and Daniel Suarez, if you look at it just by points, that's an incredible battle by itself, where you got, of those 5 guys, 3 going in, 2 going out. A win below that could completely shake that up even more and make that even more difficult, where you got maybe 3 of those guys not making it in. So I'm just like the Truck Series, I'm very interested to see how this all is going to play out. It's interesting also to me that Kevin Harvick doesn't have a win yet this season, because he had about 5 wins at this point last year, or 6 wins at this point last year. So definitely going to be keeping my eyes on the points as we head into New Hampshire this weekend, and Pocono after that, and then a wild card race, I'd say, at Watkins Glen.
This is the best part of the year, in my opinion, just because we start seeing some tracks that we only see once. Watkins Glen immediately comes to mind. New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire, just because it changed a little bit because of the date that they did, that they've chosen, that they've kind of put in the box that they have, because losing a date and they have to put it somewhere. New Hampshire used to be one of the most popular races when it was a 2-race a year event. Now it's just 1, but it's nice to have a little bit different parity, different style of tracks. It kind of sucks that we can't run 2 packages, because I think the racing is going to suffer at these different tracks. Pocono's still going to suck, I think, even with the PJ1. New Hampshire is going to suffer greatly. It's a flat mile track. I think whoever's in the lead is going to stay there. There's going to be no passing, and I cannot wait to bash it. But Watkins Glen's going to be intriguing, just because it's a fast track, and I think Dirty Air is going to matter, which sucks, but you're right. The points is awesome. It started shaping up a few weeks ago, and we briefly talked about it. We got a legitimate 5-6 car battle for 2-3 spots. So it's going to be, if someone else wins outside the top 15 or so, it's going to really tighten it up even more, because I do think there's a potential for, like you said, Suarez has been running really well. Stenhouse has shown incredible speed at times. He did lead, and you got someone like Newman, who he's on the bubble, but he somehow sneaks wins out of nowhere. It's really bizarre, but we got a good scenario. Austin Dillon, another one. Chris Buescher, he's having a career year. He's got 4 top 10s this year. So I mean, we're shaping up for a really interesting playoffs. Like I don't know. I just keep thinking about the tire wear. I just wish they wouldn't do that. And I have so many things. Like, I hate to be the negative Nancy when these races go pretty decent. I just really hope that this is not the future. I really hope not.
Hello, doggy.
They got people coming home.
It's all good. So something that we talked about beforehand, and I know you definitely want to bring it up, and this is a really good segue, because we're talking about how bad the tire wear wasn't at Kentucky, where they were pretty much hard as rocks. But NASCAR and Goodyear talked to my friend Jerry Jordan, who's with Kicking the Tires. They have an exclusive out right now where Goodyear and NASCAR believe that a bigger tire, whereas right now they're using a 15-inch diameter tire,
Correct.
they're going to be going. They're. It says right here, NASCAR and Goodyear definitely will increase tire size diameter, probably to 18 inches, beginning in 2021 when the new Gen 7 Cup Series race car is put into to use. So, like I said, this is a pretty good segue. What are your thoughts about that, Kevin? Like, you've said how much the Gen 7 needs to be a really good car, and I feel like this is possibly a step in the right direction.
It really just depends on what they do with the width of the tire. I hope you link the article to Kicking the Tires because I read it a couple times, and the one thing they kind of haven't been concrete on is if they're going to widen the tire or if they're going to narrow it up. I'm 100% an advocate for making it narrower. I think uh, if they make it 18 inches in diameter, which it's just funny that they put it at 18 because I think Denny Hamlin during the offseason suggested that they do just that. They bring it to 18 inches and they're going to do exactly what he said. I wonder if it's going to increase the sidewall strength and allow them for bringing softer tires. I think that's the reason why they're going to do it. I also think it's for an aesthetic purpose. If you look on a standard production model car, you don't see a 15-inch wheel on a car. You see between 17 and 20 inches on a conventional sedan. So I think that's one big component of it is that they're doing it to make these cars look more like a production car. Uh, I hope that they can bring a more narrow tire along with it. I hope that they can bring it down maybe 2 or 3 inches because I I said it during our little discussion about the Gen 7. In a world of if I can control everything, here's how I'd make it. I want somewhere like Daytona to be a lifting track. I want them to lift there. And I'm not talking about going 240 into turn one and they have to lift and they're doing 220. I want them to be able to go 200, 205 into turn one and have to lift to say 190 or 195. I would love that. So I'm hoping that's the direction they go. But I think the main objective is that they're going to be able to bring softer tires because the sidewall should be stronger. But like I said, there's an article about it on Kicking the Tires that kind of goes into discussion what they're thinking. They're up in the air as well about what the width is going to be. They talked about doing both, making them wider and making them narrower. And they even talked about like obviously you want a narrower tire. It just depends on if it's feasible for them from a construction standpoint. The one thing that kind of stinks about the whole situation is there's going to be a lot of parts that have to adjust to this. Obviously, they're going to get a whole new car and a whole new chassis and eventually new engines, but the brakes are going to be something that they can change as well. They can put bigger brakes in these cars, and that costs money. They're going to be able to do some funky things with the aero because there's more air coming through the tires, and that costs money. So it's two sides of the coin, and it's going to be intriguing. I think it's a positive change long term, but it's going to be intriguing to see how these teams handle it as far as R&D to make the cars fast and how the tires race. It's going to be intriguing, and I'm excited.
Well, I'm definitely not as versed on this type of stuff as you are. I, I I don't know what to think about it except that I can only say that any type of change is a positive thing going forward. If they feel like this is going to bring a better product to the track week in and week out, then by all means, I hope they get it right. I hope that they, I hope it works. I really do. It'll be cool to see the bigger tires just as like an aesthetic type of feel to it. That'll be cool visually, but I also want to visually see better racing. I also want to see how how is this change going to give us more passing, less, more strategy or whatever, where, maybe more driver skill comes into it rather than being in the right position at the right time. So like I said, I'm not totally as versed as you are on this, and I'm not trying to be like ignorant or anything about it. I'm just, I read this article. I read it a couple days ago when it came out, and I can't really make heads or tails on it yet because I don't know what it's gonna do. I don't know, like, it could be the best thing, it could be the worst thing. It all depends on how they incorporate it in, and they make it work. So there's a lot. This is more than just a tire, in my opinion. This is the whole Gen 7 car. This is just one of the very first steps that's going into it. Is that this car that they're going to be building, they're building it around these bigger tires. So, I mean, I'm very, I just, I want the Gen 7 car to be the greatest thing ever. And, I'm setting myself up for disappointment because, they're hyping everything up, and we're hyping everything up, and we're all getting super excited about this car that nobody even knows what it looks like at this point. I don't even know if NASCAR knows what it looks like at this point. So, and it's still, we got another full season after this season to worry about it.
Yep.
So, bigger tires, if they do it right and it produces better racing, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think it's in NASCAR's best interest to bring the lowest downforce car possible. Uh, the amount of loads these cars put on these tires is a lot of reasons why they bring as hard of a tire as they do. It's one of those things where it's a double-edged sword it's a pretty much straight at Goodyear. If they bring a super soft tire, then the teams are going to get really aggressive with the setups and blow tires out because of camber. If they bring a really, really hard tire, they blister or they produce the racing that we saw at Kentucky where, they're close and, they're pretty much running wide open in one corner, but there's not a lot of disparity as far as the actual speed goes. So I'm hoping with this change they can bring something really soft. And I think if NASCAR goes in the direction of as little downforce on the car as possible and as little side force on the car as possible, it's going to decrease the load on the tire itself and create the racing we're used to back in the 90s and the early 2000s where you'd have comers and goers because the tire wear is different and the construction of the tire actually changes as the tire wears because of how much it's wearing. And I think, like you mentioned, it's something that's going to all come together. They're building the foundation on these tires. It's a huge announcement. Every single time I hear something like actual concrete changes, they're going to be more production style, or they're going to bring production style size tires, and they're doing all these things, and they're going to be different engines, and it's all this and that. Every single concrete change I've heard, I've enjoyed and I've liked. So another good change. I'm just waiting for, and I think we all want to see something concrete. I don't think we will until probably middle of the season next year, so we got another year to go, but it's a good change. And I think Goodyear's got enough experience. This is going to be the first tire that's going to be this size for any stock car series. Most series run 14 or 15 inch diameter wheels, the actual wheel itself. So I'm excited, and I think Goodyear is too for the challenge. So 2021 can't come soon enough for me.
It'll definitely be another wrench thrown into the pile because the last line on this report from Jerry is that they're not looking to change the tire in the trucks or the Xfinity series. So this is going to be an exclusive to Cup only thing. So like we've both said, it's a change that's coming, and hopefully it produces something that's really good. If you want to check out the article, the exclusive that Jerry Jordan got, it's on Kickin'. There's no G at the end. thetires.net. I'll link it in the YouTube description.
Their website looks really good, by the way. I'm just kind of chilling on it. I've never been on there before. It looks really nice.
Yeah, they definitely they got a lot of great staff members over at Kickin'. I know Matt. I've been talking with him, Matt Corson. Me and him, him and I are going to be hanging out this weekend over at New Hampshire. So that'll be really cool. I'm looking forward to that. So we'll move on from that. We're an hour 25 in. As always, I want to go over some esports. Just a brief recap this week, just because I'm getting a little bit tired here, honestly. That last week, the iRacing Peak Antifreeze Series was at Kentucky, and Zach Novak was the winner. He won pretty handily over the rest of the field. He was able to hold off pretty much everybody else. The only real threat that he had was at the beginning of the race, it looked like, from Bobby Zelensky. Other than that, Novak just absolutely dominated and pulled into victory lane at Kentucky. They've only got a couple races left before their playoffs begin. Their next race is at Pocono, and that'll be next week. The NASCAR Heat Series, they raced at Chicagoland last week. On the PS4 side of things, it was Josh Harbin picking up his first win of the season, and then Justin Brooks won on the Xbox side, his second win of the season. And that's what we got in the world of esports for this past week.
It for once, I think the oval side of Peak was more boring than the actual Cup side, just because they ran the old style. And man, dirty air played a huge factor, because Novak was faster than Zelensky that first run, but you wouldn't know it if you watched the first half of that first half of the race, just because could not pass. So it became a real points or real track position type race, like the Cup side, but it was just not as thrilling. But always good to watch those Peak boys. They put on a show. Once again, Ray Alfala has a tough break, and the downfall of Ray. I don't know where he is in points. They said I think they said he was in 27th in points. I could be wrong, but we have a 4-time champion not in the top 20, and that's pretty insane to think about.
Yeah, it was another tough break for Ray. Coming down to the end of the race, which, by the way, was the first green-white checker in the Peak Series history.
Yeah.
That was set up, of course, though, by Ray's flip, which came right there at the end. The first caution was his teammate, Chris Overland, ended up getting into, I believe, who was it? Chris Shearburn. Those two ended up spinning, bringing out the caution, packed up the field. And that's when, on the ensuing restart, that's when Ray went tumbling in turns 1 and 2. He ended up on the lid of who was it? It was Benefiel. I think Adam Benefiel.
He was Adam Benefiel. That was really funny.
He was just surfing on top of the car for a couple seconds, and he ended up unfortunately falling back pretty far in the standings, which it's a shame, because I mean, he was just last year celebrating his 4th championship, and you think going into this year there's nobody's gonna be touching him, because he's got the momentum on his side, and that's not the case at all. He's had one of the most rough seasons I can ever remember anybody else ever having. I'm trying to pull up the points here, because I don't normally put the points in my recap, and I want to see where he is, because well, at this point there's no hope of him getting into the top 8. That's not happening. But he's got a good chunk of the season to turn his luck around and hopefully get back into the top 20, so he doesn't have to worry about being in the Pro Series next year.
He's 23rd, so I mean,
he's 27th.
What am I looking at here?
I don't know.
This shows 23rd, unless this is not updated, because I went to iRacing.com.
Yeah, I'm looking at the official feed on the points report. Ray is currently showing in 27th position, and looking to
Well, that was right the
20th.
first time.
The 20th place driver is Dylan Duval, who's got 217 points, and Ray has 197. So he's 20 points out of being in the top 20, which is not, that's not insurmountable by any means. He knocks off a couple top fives finishes, he'll be right back in it. He's just got to get the luck on his side. It's absolutely insane the amount of bad luck that he's had. Looking at his stat line, he doesn't even have a top five this season. Um, his average finish is 23rd. He's so many incident points too. It just absolutely insanely bad year for Ray. But their playoffs are starting to take shape as well. Keegan Leahy's got the point lead. Ryan Michael Luza. Those two have pretty much been the class of the field the entire season. And I'd say now Zach Novak's starting to get into that. He's got 3 wins. Luza's got 3 wins. Leahy's got 2 wins. Then you got Blake Reynolds and Garrett Lowe. They're 3rd and 4th in the points. They don't have any wins yet this season. Neither does Michael Connie, who's in 6th.
Kings of consistency, those 3. They're up in the top 5, top 10 every single week. It's pretty impressive.
Definitely very impressive. Just, I feel like if they're going to have any shot at actually winning the championship, they got to start finding their way to victory lane and start finding their way fast. And then the 2 drivers that round out the top 8 are Bobby Zelensky and Nick Ottinger, who both have victories on the season. It's not that many points from 8th to 9th, though. Ottinger has a 1 race less advantage over the rest of the field. He's only got 10 starts, whereas the rest of the field's got 11. But he's still in 8th. Mullins is only 6 points behind Jimmy Mullins, and Mullins had a hell of a race at Mullins. What'd I say? Mullins,
not Tim Mullins or whatever that guy was from Open Speedway.
Ugh, Jimmy Mullis. I apologize. He is 9th in points. He's 6 points back, and like I said, had a really good race. Almost, given the right circumstances, he could be the winner at Kentucky. Not Zach Novak, but Mullis he gets a top 5 finish, and he's pretty much the only guy I'd say who could break up this top 8 in any way. With the amount of races left, I mean, Brad Davies is kind of there, and Christian Challoner's kind of there. But they're a little bit further back. They're 30 and 33 points out. So it'll be interesting to see how it happens at Pocono. Hopefully they have a good race. If it's anything like real life, it probably won't be. But that's our e-racing update.
Pocono should be interesting just because of how much they can draft. I'm really excited for Michigan because it's going to be pretty much a full-blown super speedway, give or take maybe the end of the run. Bristol's gonna be wild. I don't think they've run there since like 2010 or something like that, some crazy long time. So I think it's shaping up for a really good peak antifreeze season. I've enjoyed every single race I've watched this year. It's been the complete opposite of what I've seen in Cup, in terms of like my pessimism coming into play and being like turned upside down and being like, oh, that was actually not that bad. I've enjoyed peak all year just because I'm a huge supporter of Blake Reynolds. He's a really good friend of mine, and I love seeing him come from being a mid-pack to back half of the field guy to 3rd in points. I think he's a top talent, and they finally have top end setups in those cars, and it shows. And I'm excited to see how they perform throughout the playoffs.
It's crazy because Blake didn't even get drafted in the original draft. He wasn't one of the 24 drivers that was taken by one of the 12 original teams. He ended up getting drafted in the couple weeks after the season started by Austin Dillon's team Dillon Esports. Definitely a hell of a pickup there. He was just a diamond in the rough, and you could see that it's paid off for that team with him sitting 3rd in the standings. So and his teammate is Ben Nelson. who's unfortunately not having that great of a season.
He had
Um,
a really good run going at Kentucky, so I think his luck's gonna start changing. But yeah, it's been tough for him.
yeah, it's been tough on a lot of the drivers this season, but that just goes to show um, how incredible the talent is in the entire 40 car field. There's honestly there's any one of them could win on any given week given the right circumstances. Well, maybe not all of them, but I'd say a good
20.
majority of the field.
I'd say 20. Yeah, 20, 25 guys. 'Cause, I mean, everyone. I think everyone in the top 25 can win. I mean, there's some heavy hitters that aren't in the top 20 right now. Matt Busa's really good. Obviously, you have Ray Alfala, Yarltien, who's a teammate to Keegan Leahy. Shearburn has been fast this year. You got the second in command as far as Wood Brothers and Chris Overland. So, I mean, there's some pretty decent names in the back half of this field that uh, really could have a shot any week, like you said. So it's gonna be an exciting season. I hate NASCAR heat, so let's not talk about that. And I think we can wrap it up on that note.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Um, if you're out there and you want to download any of our podcasts, we are on Apple, we are on Google, we are on Spotify. Check us out, the For the Fans podcast. You can listen to us on your drive into work, drive home from work, drive to the mall, or wherever the hell you're going. We're there. I got my Apple CarPlay set up finally with my iPhone yesterday. I've had it, but I haven't used it just because it hasn't been my primary phone. But now it is my primary phone, and the first thing I did was I pulled up the For the Fans podcast just to see how it integrated, and it works very well. You can actually do it like double time, so you can listen to our whole hour and a half podcast in 45 minutes, which is a pretty cool feature. So definitely check us out on Apple Podcasts as well as Google Play and Spotify if you're watching us on YouTube. Thank you all for listening to us and taking the time out of your day to support us. We really do appreciate it. I'm Justin Melillo. That's Kevin McAdams, and everybody enjoy the rest of your week.
Goodbye.